Alright, so now let's continue and let's assign the JWT token for the user. So here it's nothing to do with the secret key, but actually maybe we should probably rename that one to secret just to be more explicit. I would just rename on PHP Storm IntelliJ. You have an option to refactor easily. I think on VS Code as well you might have to. You see, for me I just rename the property like this with PHP Storm. Otherwise you might have to do it manually, so in my case I will do secret, or maybe JWT secret key like this. Otherwise you just have to look for the JWT key variable, you search for it, and you have to replace that one to JWT secret key. That's also an option to do. But in our case, since it's available, I'm going to use the built-in refactoring tool in PHP Storm just to rename easily a property just like that. So now it's JWT secret key. At least we don't have confusions anymore, and we are good then to store the user JWT once the user is logged in, once the credentials are correct. So here I can also move that one probably, or at least I will store it in a variable like this, is credentials valid equals, or probably, yeah, we can move it to a function, to a method, but already like this, are credentials valid with the email and the password. It's a little bit more readable because we refactor the Boolean condition, into a readable variable, but you could do the same. You could have done the same to refactor a Boolean condition into a readable method function. For me, I will keep it as a variable for now. So here, as soon as the credentials of the user we receive from the API, from the client, as soon as this one and this one is correct, the email and the password, then we know that user is legit. We receive the correct email and password, so we can give the user some rights to stay logged in on the platform, and we will store the JWT login token for that specific user into the database. And we will do that. So here we generate the token. As you can see, we return the token there, but just before to return the token, we will probably have to, let me see, here we'll do, because we have to speak to user DAL, as it will be much nicer. Otherwise we could, quickly update the property. But what I will do, I will create a new function in our user DAL. After get all, remove does exist here, public static function, and here to be update user token, and there to be, that will be a string, to be JWT token. And so we will have the user. First we have to find the user, so let me think how we might do it. yeah, so we find the user. So what we will do, we are going to do exactly like what we did here. We do user bean equals r find one self the table name users, and here it will be user user. Since we are here, we have the data from the user there, so it will be user UUID, and there we will also do token and string user UUID, and so we will do user UUID equals, we do the binding user UUID, and there we have an array. It will be user UUID, and the value, that's a key, the value will be this one, the user UUID. Perfect. I can store that into a variable, so it's a little bit more readable. It will be bindings like this. Perfect. Here it will be bindings. Perfect. And there we can now start to update the user. So we will first, here we have return after, and there we do user bean to be active, or maybe just token or active token. Session token could be session token equals, and there to be the JWT token. And finally we save it, so we do R store, and we just do user bean to store this. Perfect. So you see, we found the user. Again, we could have used the current user bean from before because we retrieved the email already earlier, but we will just split into its own function, update user UID. Obviously, we could have retrieved the user bean from service and then not having to look up again for the user, but because we want to split all functions to be standalone, we are doing this. And also it's because we don't want to have any ORM database, data access database codes related in our service, and we want to only have all of these in the DAL class. It's just easier to go with this way instead. So here, user update user token, I can just do update token, and there I will do user DAL, oops, like this, update token, and here to be the token, here to be T, this one, here to be T token, and there, here to be data user. Oh, of course we use our, yeah, we use this one, so we use the user entry, since remember when you do get by email, it returns the user entry, and this is from unserialized, it returns this. So there in user service we can simply do get, where is it? Oh, that's the data we receive from the API. So in our case it will be user, there to be get user UUID, and get user UUID is this one from the entry user from there. So now we just do like that way to update the token, and so we store it in the database, and we will be able to reuse it and to check if it matches with the bearer token the client will send. So the client will send a bearer token, so BERER, and bearer token, this one. That's a bearer token the client will send, and we'll be able to match with what we have in the database to see if the user is stored or not, and if the user is logged in, if the session is active or not. And that's the most important part, if the user is logged in or not at the moment, because an API is stateless. We don't use sessions like traditional sessions, we use tokens instead. And this is why we need to store the token, and while the user is logged in, we will check if the request the client sends to us is legit or not. So the client will send a bearer token, and the API will check, will compare with what the API has currently in the database. So this is why we need to store it in the database. And we can actually do set token instead. Maybe that's the name is more appropriate. Update token to be set token, like this, and here to be void. And yeah, we don't want to return anything for that function. It's just setting the token, and we can even do close for optimization. Perfect. So now we can test it again by doing login. Oh, it looks to be working. So if I go to the database, and if I do select all from users, from the table users, and if I select my user here, so do I have the token? Now you see I have session token. So if I do select session token, I have it. So is this one the same as the one I have here? EY, I can compare it, and yeah, it is the same. If I search this, and I will just search there, you see I have it. So amazing. And I could also have done with the email, so I could have done select session tokens from users where email equals the email, and I have the token. So well done. Now we are storing the JWT token into the database for the user. So that's just amazing. We can also, what we could do as well is to store the time the user is being logged. So when I log into the service, I want to have the probably the last login time. So it will be, if you go back, and I can set that also in set token. So it will be user bin session time, last session time. It will be last session time, and it will be just time. We'll use the PHP function time, and we have used it already before. If we look there, we have used it here, current time, for the JWT to generate the JWT token. We have used it as well, and here I'm using it. And remember, for the JWT token, it has a expiry date, and which is set in the env variable. We will use that one later anyway. This is the one we have previously set. Anyways, so now we have in our user DLL, we we also store the time, so we have the last session time. If I try it again, and now if I select all columns for that user, I will see RedBean PHP created a new column, and the name is last session time, and I have it. So if I just do select last session time, if I select that column, you see that's obviously a timestamp, but I can convert timestamp to human date. It's better to store timestamp, is it uses less storage and it's just more efficient. You see, that's today. Yes, it's today. So obviously the time zone is not the same. Oh yeah, I have the time zone. You see, that's my time zone. It's UTC plus 10, GMT, Greenwich plus 10. So it's correct. So well done, we have done it. Now we can commit our changes. And this is what we have done. We have created a setToken static function in user.dll, and we have renamed the property JWT key to JWT secret key in our user service. There we have stored the Boolean condition into a more readable variable, and here we use the new setToken function defined in user.dll to set the active user JWT token and the last session time mentioned in there for the database. And that's it. And so now I can just commit store user JWT token and the last session time into users DB table. Beautiful. I can even use some backticks because it will just highlight a bit better on GitHub the users table. I can push this and I can even show it to you, GitHub. And let's see this repositories, and that's our project. And you see the users, it's like a code highlight. It's highlighted because I have used backticks like this, which is really nice. So yes, well done. We have done it successfully. Beautiful. In this video, we will apply some little changes, enhancements. So the first, it will be here in user.roots.php. So it's again when you go to src and then src for source, root, and user.roots.php. And there you see, initially we have set post method for the update when we update the user. That's really fine in a lot of professional applications and in big companies even where I have been working too. They use post method for updating, but ideally it's better to have a put. And even sometimes you would have a patch. Patch would be more optimized. It will use less resource because put has a higher bandwidth, and on the other hand, patch just update the exact resource, the specific one we will apply for patch. So this is why it's just a little bit better, but put usually is the one we would go by default. So patch is a little bit more specific, a bit narrower, and post, well, post is exactly the same than create. They both have minor differences. You can have a look on the internet. One of the advantages is that if you have a post with the same endpoint. So for instance, if I go to Insomnia again, I have a post, it's update. So if you use the friendly URL, it will be user update, something like this. And now I can have exactly the same endpoint, but post. So one with put, one with post, and we'll both do two different things. So for instance, we could have one same endpoint to do one thing, but it will be for updating with put, and the other one for adding the same resource with post. So I could have user post and user put to be two different endpoints, one for updating, one for creating. This is one of the advantage, but it's also to be more accurate. And for a RESTful API, usually for RESTful, you don't really use that much patch, but you would definitely use put. So here we can just do put there because although you can leave it as post, I think we should to keep it clean and to use the best practices. It will still be better for your application to have a put method. So again, it's the HTTP specifications. If you have a look out there, so put for us for the update. That's one of the announcements we will do. The second one, it will be in the user service. So if we go to service, user, and here we send 500 error when the user is not found, for instance. It's okay, but it will be better to send a 400 because sometimes it's not really an internal error. We have done that before, but when the user is not found, we will just use blank here and we will do 400, or it would depend if it's not found, or maybe it might have an error also when we try to create, like he has to create a user. So it's definitely about not found. But for the update method, if you go to the update one, so this one, we do the same. You see here, we do 500. And usually when we attempt to update the customer, the user, in the user DLL, if it will return false, it will be because the user hasn't been found. But it could be also because Redbean PHP had an issue while trying to update the bean, so the user bean, when we attempt to save the user. So it depends a bit. In our case, we will, you see, the return false it could be an internal error, but this return false, it's when the user isn't found. So here, return false when the requested user isn't found, like this. And we can even have uppercase. So for that reason, here I will do not found, like this. So to be a 404 there, set a not found 404, not found error. Most likely I will do like this. Most likely the user isn't found. Send a 404 to the client, so to the API. Perfect, like that. So now if we try to update a user, this one will I need to put, you see now I need to put because we swapped from post to put for the update. And this one, that's a valid UUID, but if I try another one, that user isn't found, and now I have a 404. That's perfect. And the other one to create, I will change to, yeah, probably to a 400. So to that one, a bad request. So here I can just do bad request. I will remove this. Set if we receive an error while creating a user to the database, give a 400 to client. Perfect. And now the other change I would like to do is when we create a user. Indeed, when we create one, at the moment we do this, that's fine, but we don't really return a UUID. We just return what we received from the payload. So we receive data from the payload when we create a user. So when you go to user.roots, you see that's the data we receive, the post body, which is from the PHP stream input. So here we try to create a user. We do create, I need post. Sometimes for the client, it's handy to have the UUID back. So we should return the UUID. And then we definitely need to find a way how we can return the UUID. So if I go to user.dal to create the user, we just create that user. This one will return the red bean PHP, so the sequential ID. So the incremental ID to be like ID 20, ID 21, but it doesn't return the UUID. We need then probably to, after that, so we have the user UUID, we have the increment ID here, and I can find the user UUID from there. If I do user bin again equals, and then here I will do R to be find one, or it will be just load with the incremental ID. We can use load, and here to be table, so our users table, and then it will be the ID like this. Because if you go to load, you can see that that's the table for us, and that's the ID. The ID, so ID of the bin you want to load. So we will load the resource like this, and then we will return there user bin, here to be user UUID, just like this. Return user UUID, and then here we do, we'll keep like this string. That's perfect. Integer, probably it won't return an integer anymore. False, either false or the user UUID, which is a string. So now if I go back here, create, we can remove this. We will use a exclamation mark if it's negative, but we will do user UUID equals. So we will assign the value while doing the condition. And if this one is negative, if it's false, if it's a falsy one, we go here in this block. Otherwise, we will have the user UUID, and we can update that one by doing array merge. And there I will have the data. And here I will have, if we go to array merge, it's just to merge an array. So I need the other one, the other array, which will be this one. This one will work, but we could also update the array by doing updated array equals data plus, we can use a plus sign. We could also do this. Let's see. Let's first try with array merge. And here I will need to try another email address. Oops. Our std class was given. Yeah, indeed. I need to. Oh, I will probably, if std class, let's go back to create, and for the data, indeed, that one, it's an object, so we can cast it as an array like this, or we would be able, yeah, we can first do this. So, and here I will change the email. You see that one works. And user UID, I will probably do like this. User UID with a key. So I will have a key now. You see, user UID, that's fine. Now we have the user UID, and that will be, we can use it for the client. And you can even see, if I look it in the database, if I do a lookup, if I do select all from users where user UUID equals this one, I have it. Amazing. I have that user. But we can also do it differently. We can comment this, uncomment that, and we could return updated array. Obviously this one, it's not an array, so we have to cast it first. And then, maybe this, otherwise I have to cast it before, so it will be like this, and here it will be data equals, and here I can add data like this, and then I can return that one, or just need, I think it has to be an array too, so I can do this, and that will be the same result pretty much. Oops, I will need a unique email, and you see I have again the user UID, and again I need a key here, user UID. So we can also update the array with PHP like this. There's just a little difference with array merge. So array merge will, if the other key already exists, it will just behave differently. So when you use the plus sign, it will always merge an existing key with the other one. And if you go to array merge, we can even go to the documentation if we wish to. If we go there, here they mention merge one or more array, and even if you search array merge PHP vs plus sign, so you see in PHP you can combine the array with a plus, or you can use the array merge. What's the difference? The only difference is when you use the plus, the array doesn't get overwritten, but array merge does. So when the keys already exist, it won't be overwritten with the plus sign, but array merge will just overwritten the value. We can see here with the associative arrays. So you see here we have this array, and there we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and with a merge array 1 with array 2, 6 or 0, 1, 2, that's the same. The difference is obviously really little. It's only when the array could be overwritten or not when we update two existing keys. So here we have full, you can see bar 1, bar 2, and then they do the same there, 2 and 1, and you can see the result is the opposite because the other one was already in there of the value full. On the documentation, they also mention, if you look for the overwritten, they mention that array merge overwritten overrides the previous value, but they also mention that you can use the plus sign, so the array union operator, if we don't want to have the elements to be overwritten. So that's the only difference here. It's not really a big deal. For me, I like to use the plus sign, the plus operator, and it does work the same way. So if I try again now, if I change the email, you see we'll have the user UID in there with a value. The last example to update an array would be, because it's a std class, this one, if we don't want to cast into an array, we could just do data user UID equals, and then we use user UID like this, and finally we return the data. So we can also do this, and that one, oops, if I change the email, you see I have user UID. And finally, this will be the best for us, for our use case, because it's less code, as you can see. So here I can set user UID to the object, or maybe add user UID to the object to return, to give back the user UID to the client. Perfect. And that's just the best in this scenario, because we don't have to do any casting. And to cast is like to transform a data type to a different one, and sometimes it's not. It might make the code a little bit messier. And in user roots anyway, we are, if we look here, JSON encode will return the correct data. So even if create, when we do create, the response could be a, so if we look here, actually, if I do var dump there, the response will be an object. Oops, the array already exists, but if it's an array, it will be an object, and if it's an object, the result will always be an object in the result, because we use JSON encode, and JSON encode doesn't matter if it's an array or an object, it will give back an object format as a string to the client. So it will be a string, but formatted as a JSON object. And you see here, that's the object we sent. It's a std class, and we just added user UID. This is why we could have done this with like an object, because it's part of the std class. So std class is like the default object class from the std PHP library. If you look here, std class and the std library PHP is the main default, the standard PHP library PHP offers by default. And that's the std class. It's just an object, okay, empty object. The std class is always there with PHP, so it's a default class you can use to create some properties and so on, like what we have done here. Perfect. So now we can commit our changes, because as you can see, everything works very well. And I will just remove the, if I go here, we remove the var dump we have done. It was in user roots, so I will just remove this. Perfect. And now if there is an issue when I try to create the, oh, you can see I have 400 actually that I didn't see. We always send a 400 now. Here I have 201, but as soon as we have an issue, the email already exists, 400. And that's normal. This is what we want actually. And if now the email is invalid, we send a invalid payload. We also send a 400, because if you remember our validation class, so email existing, you see that's a bad request we sent, and invalid invalid validation, it's a bad request too. So now most of the time we always send a 400 all the time. So even if it's an internal one, we would also send a 500. I believe that's a 201 when it's successful, but here, let's see if there is maybe something we can distinguish better. Something we can distinguish better, we can have probably the bad request, forbidden, maybe not. But 500, I believe, is a little bit too extreme. Yeah, I don't really see one that might fit better. No, bad request, forbidden, not acceptable. Yeah, for the moment, I believe we can leave it as it is. So now we can commit. And you see, we have changed indeed how the create method in the user DLL returns, because now we return the user UUID. When you go to user DLL, create, we changed here, and when we create the user, oh sorry, that's update. When we create the user, you see we return this one, and that's a string. UUID is a string data type. Perfect. So that's why we have changed the function signature. Here we return this one indeed, and now here if it's I just added a comment here just to be more explicit, that we return false when the user is not found, and that's why we have also changed the HTTP status code in the user service to 404 when the user isn't found. There we have changed the HTTP method from post to put. Here we have just changed the logic in there, so we can retrieve the user UUID when we create a user, and there we just update the object, the std object, to include also the user UUID. So when we create a user, we will have the user UUID back from the result in our client. So again, if I have another email, you see, that's our user UUID. And I have the lovely 201 HTTP status code. So there, what we have done, we have changed from a internal server error, a 500, to a 404. And that's pretty much it. So now we can comment this, enhance, result, it should be end HTTP status methods. Perfect. And now I can just do a git push, and that's it. Lovely. Alright, so in this video I will just show you a few improvements you can do in your API. The first, it's about the try and catch. So here indeed we have a try and catch in set tokens. So set tokens is where we want to save the tokens. We are in user DLL, and when a user logged in to our service, so the API sends a request. Again, if I go to Insomnia, we want to log in, that's fine. But in case for some reason we can't save the token of the user to the database because of red bean PHP, or because MySQL, your database is not responding, you will have an exception. And the problem is that it will still go here and it will still show a successful message. Even if this one, the R colon store, is throwing an exception. So we have to catch that one. At the moment we don't, and this is the important part, is to catch it. So how we will do it? Well, we will create a new exception class, but first I will do try, and here I will do catch, and I will do exception. So just to make sure store is throwing what's the exception it does, SQL exception, and I can actually see it here. The exception it does throw. So you can see SQL, and SQL is from there. So we will catch this exception. So in our case, it's not in user.dll. I will just add this for the documentation, but we will catch this one in user. So in the user service, when you are, so that's the namespace, you see service. So you just have to go to src service folder, and in there set token, and there I will change this to red bean. I will actually import, although obviously we don't want to have any dependencies, and we don't want to rely on red bean PHP in user service. It's not really clean to do that, because we will add a new dependent just because of that class SQL. We don't want, like, user service doesn't want to know what ORM we use. For this reason, I will just make it generic, and I will do exception for now. Like this, I will import exception, because our SQL, our red bean SQL exception extends to, we go there, extends, and will inherit to the PHP exception. If we just click there, and you see that's the PHP exception. You can see the inheritance, and so we are safe to use exception in the user service. So there, so I will just import exception first on the top, just exception like this, and then, oh yeah, we have, oh no, we don't want this one, perfect, just exception, and then I go back there, we have exception, and I will throw this exception. So that's a class we will create now. I will just remove my to-do comment, and this one I will create in the, I will create that one, cannot login user exception inside of the exception folder in the service folder. So I will have this new class, cannot login user exception, and there I will do this one, extend exceptions like this. I can even import if I wish, only if I wish, like we can just leave it like this. That's, you know, we don't have to import for such a small class. We can obviously, and I think this is what we did there, we have runtime exception as well, or actually it can be a runtime exception there. Let's do runtime exception, and we can I will import actually. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's nice to be consistent and to import, no matter what, to import every class and never using the absolute import like that when you do extends, but you would import there. And that's nice as well to keep it consistent, so at least you have the same standard in the whole code base, and consistency is key if you want to have like to improve the maintenance of your application. Consistency is number one. So here now I can import that one. Perfect. And then I will catch that one. Cannot login user exception in the user.root. So if I go to user.root, I will do this catch, and then I will import that one on the very top there, and then I will do exception. And here what I will do, so if we cannot save, obviously we don't want to continue there, and I will send a bad request, maybe not, it might be, yeah, I'm just looking. Yeah, it could be a bad request actually. Like if we cannot send the token, we cannot save the token, but we want to give back to the user, to the client, to the result. Like 500 probably is a bit too extreme, 200 obviously not. So we will give for the client the HTTP method, the HTTP status code. It will probably be 400 for now. I believe that's okay, that's fine. And then what I will do, I will just do response, and then I will have only message, and the message will be the one we have set here, cannot set token to user. That's enough. So it will be the same message, we will just reuse it there. And then this one I will move to root.php, because that one, invalid validation exception, I have noticed I have exactly the same in the food item. So if I go to food item.root.php, so when you go to root folder, and then that one, food item roots, you see we have the same. So we just remove this to remove any code duplication. We don't want to have too many duplications. We want to use the don't repeat yourself principle. Just fix that. Perfect. So in there and in the user roots, I will remove this. Lovely, like that. So it's smaller. We have less code, because if we duplicate less code, by definition it will be less code, and it will be easier to maintain. Only one place to update instead of 4 or 5. And here I will just add it here. So I have this one, which was credential invalid exception, and that could be generic too. It doesn't mean it's only part of the user. Could be from an admin, could be from another another kind of user, customer. A lot of other things can be can have a invalid credentials. However, for the cannot log in user exception, that will be only for user for now. We will keep it there, and I can remove that import. We don't use that one anymore in user routes. And the same in food item. I can remove this one, and I can even remove that the two other ones because they are not used anymore for the import. And now I go back to routes.php, and here I just have to do this, and then I make sure we have that one. We have it. I will use response, which will do a echo. You will see if we go to response, it does a echo. Oops, response. Yeah, I don't know why it's. Oh yeah, you see echo JSON. Sorry, I got confused with the hash password. So echo JSON encode. This is exactly what we need. So we use the response function there, and that's it. We can message, yeah, credentials. There we don't have an error. I believe we should actually. It's nice for the client to know if it's an error or not. So we add an array there. Oops, like this. Just be like that. Response, and then yeah, and then I have the message. Perfect. So we can quickly test this, and if we have invalid credentials, we can test if it does work. Yeah, it does, you see. And now I will just check the other to do I have added. So if I do in project, I have this one. Oh yeah, that's about the token. I want just to show you the jwt.io website. It's a good one to understand better what's the JWT, so the JSON, our JWT token, our JSON web token, what it is exactly. And for doing so, I will log in. I will take the token, the JWT token, and I will go to my web browser. I will paste this one, and you see we can understand better on jwt.io what it contains, so you can understand what it does behind the scene. And it has the URL, the expiration date, and you see you can even see issued at, expiration date, the issuer, which is the URL, some data. So we have email and name. Remember when we were setting the JWT, we have here data, email, and name. You see, and so yeah, that's it's useful to understand, and feel free to use jwt.io for understanding what a JWT token has as a data. That's why it has to be like not too many sensitive data. It's always better because you can decode it. And now I will just remove that one. We don't need it anymore. And here I will just add a void type, because as you can see it doesn't return anything. So just like that, void, perfect. And finally, in favor, oh yes, that's not that's funny, that's actually a library, it's not from me. So I think that's it. If I go to src, yeah, we don't have any to do command, so we can already commit that. So git commit add with a p flag to select. I have the void return type, yes, correct. I just added a PHP doc throws, and when we throw an exception, just to mention that set token, so red bean PHP r : store will throw an exception, and this is why we want to mention this with PHP doc. If we go back to our user.dll, it's from there. And if I don't have the PHP doc, it will mention here, oh, be careful, it does return, you see, it does return this exception. If I add it for our IDE, so for our editor, our code editor, it will know that we are aware it will throw an exception. And here in there, if I don't have try catch, it will tell me the same. Be careful, it's on cut, you have to catch the exception, and that's why we have try and catch. And we throw this one, the cannot login exception, and we are catching it in user.root.php. And we can actually even test this. So if I go back to user service, and if I do throw new, just to test, red bean PHP is not happy. Red bean PHP is not happy, and now we can test this, and you see, cannot set token to user. So it does work very well. We are just simulating, like the way if red bean PHP would throw an exception from there. It doesn't, so that's why we have to throw an exception explicitly on purpose. That way, like this, that way it would be exactly the same as if red bean PHP would throw an exception. We just do it on purpose explicitly before, and so it will catch that exception. So just before to catch it, because we have try catch. So if we throw, I could have done it exactly there as well. Set token here, and now we can test. You see, it wouldn't work. At least we know it does handle properly the errors. We do handle them quite well. And now, oops, I made a typo with a comment. You see py, no, it's only p. That's correct. We have removed some unused imports. Here we are removing duplicated code with the invalid validation exception. We are moving it to root.php only in there, which is quite nice. And finally, this one, oh yeah, I just added a comment in not found.root. If we go user on, sorry, not found.roots, here I have added a comment mentioning the arrow function available since PHP 7.4, arrow function PHP 7.4, that one. You see, that's the one we use, because we only have one expression. Obviously, you need only one expression for using the arrow function with PHP, unlike JavaScript. PHP only handle arrow function with one expression, but here we do. So I just wanted to have a comment in there. And finally, we have new imports there. HTTP response, and indeed is what we have added there with the HTTP status code 400 in case we have an invalid validation in routes.php. And finally, there user.routes.php, the import there, it's a different one. We have cannot login user exception, and now invalid validation exception has been moved from user.routes to routes.php. And there we have changed, cannot login user exception. That one, we use it only for the user.routes, and we have the new file there, cannot login user exception, inside of the exception folder of our service folder. And then we have exception there, we import it. We have cannot login user exception for the user service, and we have the try catch. And now I will also add the new file, this one, the cannot login user exception, beautiful. And now I can commit, and I can just do like minor refactoring for improving code quality, perfect. Or improving, I made a typo, improving, perfect. And now I can just push it, beautiful. And yeah, this is done. We can again double check this. We can, after, what else can we do? We can also quickly test for maybe for the item, and then we can have retrieve, and we can test that one. No, I will have to item, I will just do retrieve all to be easier. And you see it works as well, very well, so I'm happy with that. And if I go to item food item.routes, yeah, we check this, that one is not used at the moment, unused for now, perfect. So normally this one should only be get, but that's fine, we don't filter unlike in user.routes. Remember, we are checking the different HTTP methods, but for our food item, that's fine. That's why I could call the retrieve all with either post or get, because we don't check what HTTP method is. You can do the check exactly the same way as what we have done with the user.routes, but it's up to you at the moment. It doesn't check, and that's really fine. So yes, that's what we have done, and yeah, that's an amazing job, so well done.